The sealed gate. The alien world of Veora was silent under a red sky. Ruins stretched across the valley, broken towers leaning like the bones of giants. At the center stood the sealed gate, a massive orifice carved into stone, smooth and flawless. No tool or weapon had ever managed to cut it for thousands of years. The aliens had tried, priests had prayed, soldiers had attacked, engineers had built machines, yet nothing worked. The orifice remained closed, tighter than steel, colder than ice. Many called it cursed, others called it holy. But one thing was clear. Only death awaited those who dared to touch it. On this day, a crowd gathered. Alien villagers whispered among themselves, their voices filled with fear and curiosity. The guardian stood at the front, a young alien girl with silver skin and dark glowing eyes. She had been chosen since childhood to watch over the sealed gate. She carried a staff. Though her duty was not to fight but to make sure no one disturbed the gate without permission, her people had grown tired of waiting for a miracle. But tradition demanded a guardian. So she waited day after day, year after year in silence. Then the human arrived. He came alone, walking with slow steps, boots crunching against the sand. His clothes were worn, his face marked with scars. Yet his eyes were calm. The crowd stared at him with confusion. Humans were rare on Veora, weaker in body compared to most alien races. What could this one want here, in front of a gate that had defeated even the strongest warriors? The guardian narrowed her eyes. "Leave," she said coldly, her voice echoing through the ruins. "This place is forbidden, even for my own kind." But the human only looked at the gate. His gaze was steady, as if the giant sealed stone was nothing more than a puzzle waiting to be solved. He stepped closer. The villagers gasped. Some shouted warnings, others muttered prayers. The guardian raised her staff to block him. "You do not understand, stranger. The sealed gate kills those who touch it. Their bodies burn, their minds shatter. It does not open. It only destroys." The human's lips curved into a faint smile. "Maybe it was just waiting for the right hands," he said softly. His words sent a strange chill through the guardian. No alien had ever spoken with such quiet confidence. Usually, they begged for permission or screamed before dying. But this human did not sound like a fool. He sounded certain, as if he already knew something no one else did. The crowd grew restless. Old priests shouted at him to leave, warning that the curse would strike. Some young warriors mocked, calling him suicidal. Yet none dared step forward to stop him. Perhaps deep inside, they too wanted to see what would happen. Would the human die like the rest? Or would something different take place? The guardian hesitated. Her duty was to protect the gate, but her heart whispered curiosity. She had seen countless deaths, yet there was something about this man that felt different, almost as if the gate itself had been waiting for him. The human reached out his hand. For a moment the air grew heavy, as though the entire valley held its breath. His palm touched the smooth surface of the sealed orifice. Instead of burning him, instead of shattering his mind, the stone trembled. A faint pulse of light rippled across its surface like water disturbed by a pebble. The crowd fell silent, eyes wide in disbelief. The guardian gasped, clutching her staff tighter. No alien had ever caused the gate to react. But under the human's touch it was alive. The light was faint, weak, but it was there. It was proof, undeniable proof, that the gate could respond. Murmurs spread through the crowd like wildfire. "Impossible," one whispered. "It moves," another cried. Priests fell to their knees, weeping. Warriors backed away, afraid. The guardian's heart raced, confusion and fear battling inside her chest. The human pulled his hand back slowly, as if testing. The light faded, but the gate did not return to silence completely. It hummed faintly, like a heartbeat waiting to grow stronger. He looked at the guardian and said in a calm voice, "It's not sealed forever. It just needs to be opened the right way." The guardian felt her throat tighten. Her staff shook in her hands. She wanted to demand answers, to order him away, but no words came. She could only stare at him, this strange human who had done in a moment what her people could not do in centuries. The sealed gate had reacted. The curse was broken, or perhaps it had never been a curse at all. Maybe it had always been waiting for someone, and for reasons none could explain. That someone was human. The crowd erupted, some in fear, some in awe. But one thing was certain. Nothing on Veora would ever be the same again. The news spread quickly through the ruins of Veora. By nightfall, every alien in the valley knew a human had touched the sealed gate and lived. Not only lived, but awakened it. even if only for a heartbeat to the aliens. This was both a miracle and a curse. Some believed it was a sign of salvation. Others whispered it was the beginning of doom. At dawn, the Guardian stood again before the gate. Her staff firm in her hands, she had not slept. Her mind kept circling back to the moment when the human's touch had made the gate glow. She wanted to believe it was a trick of her eyes. But the truth pressed heavy in her chest. The human was different, and that difference scared her. He returned in the morning, walking with the same calm steps. The crowd was larger this time. Priests in their robes, warriors in their armor, villagers with their children. Everyone wanted to see if he would try again. Some shouted insults, others whispered prayers. A few threw stones at him, but he ignored them. The Guardian raised her staff and stepped in front of him once more. "Stranger," she said, her voice colder than before. "You brought chaos yesterday, and my people are divided. Some see you as chosen, some as cursed. If you touch the gate again, you may doom us all." The human studied her for a moment. His expression unreadable, then he answered softly, "I didn't come to doom anyone, I came to understand. And maybe help." The Guardian frowned. "Help," she repeated, as if the word itself was strange. "No alien has ever opened this gate. Our strongest burned, our wisest failed. Even our ancestors left it sealed. Why would a human succeed where we cannot?" The man's lips curved into a small smile. "Because sometimes being an outsider lets you see things differently." His words unsettled her. She was trained to be firm, to never show doubt. But his calm confidence was like a storm pressing against her heart. The priest shouted for him to leave, demanding he be cast out before disaster struck. The warriors threatened to drag him away, but none dared to actually touch him. Something about the human unnerved even the boldest among them. Finally, an elder priest stepped forward, his voice trembling with age and fear. "If you truly wish to try, then you must accept the challenge," he declared. The crowd hushed instantly. The challenge was ancient law, a test created long ago. Any outsider who sought to meddle with the sealed gate must prove their worth. It was not a fight of strength, but of endurance. A trial against pain, will, and spirit. The Guardian's eyes widened. No one had dared invoke the challenge for centuries. It was cruel, often fatal, but the law was clear. If the human accepted and survived, he would be allowed to touch the gate freely. If he failed, he would die, and his death would be proof that humans were not meant to stand here. The human nodded without hesitation. "I accept," he said, as if the words were nothing more than simple truth. The crowd gasped. The priests looked horrified. The warriors smirked, certain he would not survive. The Guardian stared at him in disbelief. "Do you even know what you are agreeing to?" she demanded. He looked at her calmly, his eyes steady. "I know enough, and I don't run from challenges." The challenge began at sunset. The human was taken to the circle of trials, a ring of black stones near the ruins there. He was stripped of weapons and given nothing but his will. The first test was endurance. He was bound in chains laced with energy currents that sent sharp pain through his body every few moments. Most aliens lasted minutes before collapsing, but the human clenched his jaw and endured. Sweat dripping, muscles trembling, but his eyes never closing. The Guardian watched from the edge of the circle. Her heart pounded with every shock that hit him. Part of her wanted to look away, but she could not. Why did she care if he lived or died? He was only a stranger. Yet something about his stubborn silence stirred a strange fire inside her. Hours passed, and still he endured. The priests muttered in fear. The warriors grew restless by midnight. The human was released from the chains, his body weak but his spirit unbroken. The second test was of mind. He was forced to walk through the Hall of Echoes, a cavern filled with illusions that preyed on memory and fear. Many who entered never returned, their minds lost in endless nightmares. The human stumbled inside without hesitation. The crowd waited, the Guardian held her breath. Minutes turned to hours, shadows played against the walls. But he did not break when he finally emerged. His steps were slow, his face pale, but his eyes still burned with quiet fire. The third and final test came at dawn, the trial of choice. He was given a blade and told to strike against the Guardian herself. The rule was cruel. He must prove he would do anything to reach the gate. Even harm its protector. The crowd roared with anticipation. Eager to see blood, the Guardian raised her staff. Ready though, her chest tightened with unease. But the human only shook his head, lowering the blade. "I won't fight you," he said calmly. I didn't come here to destroy. I came here to open, the priest protested, demanding his failure. But the laws of the challenge were strict. The true test was not strength but will, and he had endured every trial without breaking. The crowd grew silent, realizing the truth. The human had passed. The guardian lowered her staff slowly. Her eyes locked on his for the first time in her life. She felt uncertainty about her duty. This human had done the impossible, and her people would never look at him the same again. The sealed gate waited in silence behind them, humming faintly as if it had felt the outcome of the challenge. The human had earned his right, and soon he would touch the gate again. But this time the whole world would be watching. The Valley of Veora was restless. The human had passed the challenge, something no alien believed possible. Now the law allowed him to face the sealed gate freely. The priests were uneasy, the warriors angry, the villagers torn between awe and fear, and the guardian. She stood silent, her staff pressed tightly in her hands, her eyes never leaving the stranger who had changed everything. At dawn, the human approached the gate again. The stone shimmered faintly in the morning light, as if it remembered his touch. The crowd gathered, whispers echoing. "He will die this time," some muttered. "Or perhaps he will save us," others whispered with trembling voices. The guardian stood before him, blocking his path one last time. "You passed the challenge," she said firmly, though her voice carried a trace of doubt. "You earned the right, but I must warn you again. The gate is not a simple door. It resists with power beyond our understanding. It killed my ancestors, it broke our wisest. You may awaken something that should stay buried." The human only looked at her with calm eyes. "Or maybe I'll awaken what your people have been waiting for all along," he replied. His words unsettled her, yet she stepped aside. The human placed his hand against the cold surface. The gate pulsed faintly, just as before. But this time the pulse grew stronger, vibrations shaking the ground, sending dust falling from the ruins above. The crowd gasped, some backing away in fear. The priests clutched their robes and began to chant, desperate to calm the unknown force. The human pushed harder, not with strength but with patience. He studied the patterns etched faintly into the stone, strange alien symbols that no scholar had ever deciphered. His fingers traced them, his mind working as though fitting pieces of a puzzle together. The guardian watched in silence, unable to look away. She noticed something no one else did. The gate was not fighting him like it had fought the others. It was testing him, resisting, yes, but not rejecting him. Suddenly, the surface flared with a burst of light. The human staggered but did not fall. The ground cracked beneath his feet, a low hum filling the air like the growl of a beast awakening. The warriors shouted warnings, some drew weapons, though weapons had never worked against the gate. The priest screamed for him to stop before the valley was destroyed, but the human pressed forward, sweat running down his face, his muscles shaking. The guardian stepped closer, her heart torn. She should stop him, protect the people, keep the gate sealed. Yet she could not ignore the truth. Something about him felt right. She raised her staff halfway, but her arms froze. If she struck him down now, it would be the end of the only chance her people had ever seen. The gate resisted with violent force. A shockwave burst out, throwing dust and rocks into the air, knocking villagers off their feet. The human groaned but dug his boots into the stone, refusing to let go. He grit his teeth, his hands burning from the energy sparking across the surface. No alien had ever lasted this long, yet he endured step by step, forcing himself closer. Inside his mind, visions began to stir. Flashes of alien worlds, rivers of fire, stars collapsing, ancient voices whispering in languages he didn't understand. It tried to break him, to tear his thoughts apart, but he held on, focusing on one simple idea. This is not a curse, it's a lock, and every lock could be opened. The guardian's heart raced as she saw him trembling but standing. She had never seen such stubbornness, such quiet strength. Even their strongest warriors screamed within seconds, but this human fought with silence. Not against the gate, but with it, as if listening to its secrets. Minutes felt like hours, the air heavy. The crowd grew restless, torn between fleeing and watching history unfold. Some shouted that he was mad. Others begged him to continue. The priest fell deeper into prayer while the warriors whispered in anger. "Why should a human succeed where we failed?" one snarled, but no one dared step forward. Finally, the gate reacted with a violent surge. The human was thrown back, slamming against the ground, dust exploding around him. The crowd gasped, certain he was dead, but slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up, his body shaking. blood dripping from his hands. And then, the gate pulsed once more, faint but alive. As though acknowledging his struggle, the guardian stepped forward, eyes wide. She lowered her staff and whispered almost to herself, "It accepts you?" The human looked up at her, exhausted but still steady. "Then I'll keep trying," he said simply. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some cheered. Others shouted curses. The priest cried in fear. The warriors argued among themselves, but all eyes were on the gate. Now glowing faintly with a heartbeat-like rhythm, the impossible had happened again. It had responded, not just once but twice. The guardian felt a shiver crawl down her spine. The man was human, fragile compared to her kind, yet he had done what their people failed to do for centuries, and deep inside she realized something terrifying. If he could open the gate fully, everything about their world would change forever. The sealed gate waited, alive with faint light. The human staggered but stood tall. Determination burning in his eyes, the guardian could not look away. Her chest heavy with fear and something else, something she didn't dare name. For the first time in her life, she whispered a silent prayer, not to the gods, not to the priests, but to the human who faced the impossible. The struggle had only begun. The valley was silent after the human's second attempt. The sealed gate still glowed faintly, its surface pulsing like a heart. The crowd could not decide whether to run in fear or kneel in awe. No one had ever seen the cursed stone react twice, and no one had ever survived the struggle for so long. By night, torches burned around the ruins, casting long shadows. The priests gathered in secret councils, debating if the stranger was blessed or dangerous. The warriors sharpened their blades, muttering that no outsider should have this much power, and the villagers whispered prayers for the first time in years. For the first time, hope and fear lived side by side in their hearts. The guardian could not sleep. She stood near the gate, staff in hand, watching the faint glow ripple across the stone. Her thoughts circled endlessly. Who was this human? Why had the gate chosen him? And what would happen if he truly opened it? Her people called the gate cursed, yet she had always wondered if it was instead a key to something greater. Now that thought burned brighter than ever. At dawn, the human returned, limping but determined. His hands were torn and bleeding from the last struggle. His body bruised, yet his eyes carried the same quiet fire. The guardian stepped forward, her heart pounding. "You cannot keep doing this," she warned. Her voice sharp but trembling beneath the surface. "The gate will break you, it will kill you. Even if you survive the pain, it will destroy your mind." The human paused, studying her face. He saw not just anger but fear. Fear not for herself, but for him. "I know the risks," he said softly, "but some things are worth breaking for." Her chest tightened at his words. No alien had ever spoken with such calm certainty. It was madness, and yet it was also strength. She lowered her staff reluctantly and stepped aside. The crowd was smaller this morning, but those who remained leaned forward, waiting. The human placed his palms against the gate once more. This time the resistance came immediately. The surface flared with violent energy, sending sparks of light racing up his arms. He groaned but held on, muscles straining. Sweat dripping down his face, the ground trembled, small stones rolling across the valley floor. The priests cried out in panic. Warriors prepared to strike him down. But the guardian raised her staff high, holding them back with a single command. "Do not interfere," she shouted. "The gate is choosing." The human pressed harder. His teeth clenched. The gate struck back with wave after wave of force. Visions flooded his mind, burning suns collapsing. Rivers of blood, endless screams of alien voices lost to time. It wanted him to break, to surrender, to let go like all the others, but he fought back not with strength but with will. He whispered through the pain, "You're not a curse. You're a lock, and every lock has a key." The guardian watched in awe as his body shook violently. His knees buckled, his skin burned red from the energy, yet he did not let go. Every other alien would have fallen within seconds, but this fragile human endured longer than anyone she had ever seen. She felt her breath catch in her throat, her heart racing faster than she wanted to admit. Then with a sudden roar, the gate lashed out. A massive shockwave exploded, blasting dust and fire into the sky. The crowd screamed, many thrown to the ground. The human was hurled backward, slamming into the stones, his body crumpling. The glow of the gate flickered wildly, as if alive and furious. The guardian rushed forward before she even realized. She dropped to her knees beside him. her hands trembling as she reached to check his breath. He coughed weakly, blood staining his lips. But his eyes opened, still burning with that same fire. "You fool," she whispered, anger and relief mixing in her voice. "You should have died." "But I didn't," he rasped with a faint smile. "And I won't stop." Her heart twisted painfully. Why did he speak as though his suffering was nothing? Why did her chest ache every time he smiled through the pain? She shook her head, forcing herself to stand, forcing her voice to steady. "You are breaking yourself, and for what? What lies behind this gate may not be salvation. It may be destruction." The human pushed himself up slowly, refusing her hand though his body trembled. "Then let it be destruction," he said, his voice raw but steady. "At least we will know the truth. And sometimes truth is worth everything." The guardian stared at him, her staff shaking in her grip. She wanted to call him reckless. She wanted to order him away. But deep inside, a small voice whispered that he was right. Her people had lived in fear for centuries, worshipping the gate but never daring to test it fully. Perhaps it was time to face what lay beyond. Whatever it was, the priest demanded he be stopped, their chants rising louder. The warriors argued whether to strike him down before he unleashed ruin. But the villagers, the ordinary ones, began to murmur differently. "He is the one," some whispered. "He endures where we fall," others said for the first time. The people themselves questioned the priest's warnings. The human looked at the gate once more, his hands trembling but his spirit unbroken. "This isn't over," he said quietly, almost to himself. The faint glow pulsed again, weaker but steady, as though the gate itself was listening. The guardian felt her chest tighten with a fear she could not name. This man was no warrior, no priest, no chosen prophet, and yet he was doing what none of her kind could do. He was walking a path that would either save them or destroy them all. As the sun rose higher, the valley trembled again. The sealed gate pulsed brighter, as if it too was reaching its breaking point. The human staggered but stood facing it with unwavering eyes, and the guardian realized with a shiver of dread and wonder, the true breaking point had not yet come. The third day began with heavy clouds over Veora. The sky rumbled with thunder as if the world itself was warning against what was about to happen. The sealed gate glowed faintly, its heartbeat-like pulse stronger than before. The people gathered again, more than ever, drawn by fear, curiosity, and hope. This was no longer a secret. Word had spread far beyond the valley, and even travelers had come to see the human face the cursed stone. The guardian stood near the gate, her staff pressed into the ground. Her heart uneasy, she had watched him suffer, break and rise again. And now she feared what the gate would do if he pushed it further. It no longer treated him as an intruder. It tested him, and today it felt as though the final test had arrived. The human walked forward slowly, his steps heavy but steady. His body carried the marks of his struggles, burned skin, torn hands, bruises across his chest. But his eyes were alive with that same quiet determination. He looked at the gate not as an enemy, but as a challenge waiting to be solved. The villagers parted, some bowing their heads, others spitting curses. The priests warned of doom, their chants loud, but even their voices shook with doubt. The guardian stepped in front of him, her staff blocking his way. "Enough," she said sharply, though her voice trembled. "You have already gone further than anyone in history. You proved your will. You proved your strength. Why risk more? Do you want to die?" The human looked at her, his face calm though tired. "I didn't come this far to stop halfway," he replied. "If I turn back now, then all of this, every wound, every struggle, means nothing. The gate must be opened." Her chest tightened painfully. She wanted to drag him away, to protect him from the pain she knew was waiting. But she also knew he was right. Something inside the gate was calling, and he was the only one who could answer. Her staff lowered slowly, her eyes filled with conflict. "Then may the stars protect you," she whispered. The human placed both hands on the glowing surface. Immediately the ground shook violently, cracks splitting across the stone floor. The air grew thick with energy, lightning sparking along the ruins. The crowd screamed, some running, some falling to their knees. The priests shouted warnings, their voices drowned by the roar of the gate itself. The energy surged into the human's body, burning him, pushing him toward collapse. He groaned but held on, sweat pouring down his face. Vision slammed into his mind again, planets consumed by fire, galaxies collapsing, voices screaming in forgotten tongues. But he pushed through, whispering to himself, "You're not a curse. You're a key. The Guardian clutched her staff. Her knuckles white. She could see him breaking, his knees trembling, his arms shaking violently, yet still he refused to let go. Every second he endured felt like a lifetime. She wanted to scream at him to stop, but her voice caught in her throat. Her eyes burned as she whispered, "Please, don't die." The gate flared brighter, so bright the valley was bathed in white light. The human cried out. His body lifted slightly from the ground as if the gate itself was trying to tear him apart. Energy crackled around him, ripping through his clothes, searing his skin. The villagers shielded their eyes. The warriors fell back. The priest collapsed in terror. Yet in the middle of it all he stood, refusing to surrender. Then cracks spread across the smooth surface of the gate. The impossible had happened. The flawless stone that had resisted for centuries now split, thin lines glowing like fire. The crowd gasped in disbelief. The priest screamed, "This is the end." The warriors froze, torn between awe and fear. The Guardian's breath caught. She had dreamed of this moment all her life, but she never believed it could happen. Her knees weakened as she whispered, "He's doing it." The human roared, every ounce of strength poured into the final push. Blood dripped from his hands, his body shaking violently, but his eyes blazed brighter than the light itself. The cracks widened, the glow spilling out like liquid fire. The ground split, winds howled, the valley thundered. And with one final surge, the gate burst open slightly. Just enough for light to pour through, the crowd fell silent, staring in shock. It was not death that came forth, not fire or curses. It was pure energy, bright and warm, flooding the valley with life instead of destruction. The ruins trembled, but the air felt lighter, fresher, as if the world itself sighed in relief. The human collapsed to his knees, gasping, his body almost broken. The Guardian rushed forward, dropping beside him, her hands shaking as she tried to hold him up. "You did it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You actually did it," he coughed weakly, his lips curling into a faint smile. "It's only the beginning," he rasped. The gate continued to pulse, its light steady now, no longer violent but alive. The crowd erupted, some in cheers, some in screams of fear. The priests wailed that doom was near. The warriors stared in silence, unable to deny what they had seen. The villagers cried tears of hope. Reaching out toward the glowing gate, the Guardian looked at the human, her chest heavy with emotions she could not name. He was broken yet victorious, fragile yet stronger than anyone she had ever known. For the first time she knelt before him, not out of duty but out of respect. Her people's fate had changed, and it was because of him. Above them the clouds split, sunlight breaking through. The sealed gate was open, even if only slightly. The moment of truth had arrived, and nothing on Veora would ever be the same again. The light from the sealed gate did not fade, it poured out like a river, flooding the valley with brilliance that burned away shadows. The villagers covered their eyes, the priests cried louder. The warriors gripped their blades, yet none dared to step closer. For the first time in centuries, the gate was no longer silent, no longer dead. It was alive. The human knelt on the cracked ground, his body trembling, blood dripping from his hands. But even through his pain, he lifted his head and looked into the glowing gap. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, his eyes filled not with fear but with wonder. The Guardian knelt beside him, her staff forgotten on the ground. Her heart pounded as the light reflected in her dark eyes. She had spent her entire life guarding this mystery, and now it was finally opening before her. "What is inside?" she whispered, her voice shaking. The human's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. "Let's find out," he rasped. The crack widened with a low rumble, stone grinding against stone. The valley shook as though the world itself was shifting. Dust rained down from the ruins, torches blew out, children screamed, and the villagers clung to one another. The priests fell on their knees, chanting prayers faster and louder. But the Guardian and the human kept their eyes on the light. Slowly the glow softened. No longer blinding but warm, it revealed a passage, a tunnel carved not by tools but by something older, something beyond alien hands. The walls shimmered with energy veins, glowing like rivers of starlight at the end of the passage. Deep within lay a core of pure light, pulsing slowly like a heart. The Guardian gasped, tears stinging her eyes. "This is life," she whispered. Her people had long suffered under famine, sickness, and failing lands, but the energy before her felt alive, full of warmth and renewal. She could sense it even from a distance. This was power that could heal, power that could save. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some shouted that it was salvation, Others screamed it was a trap. The priest wailed that the end of days had begun. The warriors roared that the core must be claimed by force. The valley turned into a storm of voices, hope clashing with fear, but through it all, the human remained calm, his eyes steady on the glowing heart within. This is what it was hiding, he said softly, not death, but the power to live. The guardian turned to him, her chest heavy with emotions she couldn't name. You were right, she whispered, her voice breaking. Only you could open it. But even as the truth settled, a new shadow fell over the valley high above. The clouds parted not from sunlight, but from ships. Dark shapes emerged in the sky. Massive alien vessels descending with thunderous engines. The villagers screamed, the priests fainted. The warriors raised their weapons in panic. The guardian's blood ran cold. They came, she whispered, her voice trembling. They were watching all along. The human pushed himself weakly to his feet, swaying but unbroken. Of course they were, he muttered. Something this powerful wouldn't stay hidden forever. The ships spread across the sky like vultures circling prey. Beams of light scanned the valley. Voices in alien tongues echoed from loudspeakers, demanding surrender. They had come not to worship, not to pray, but to take. The energy core was no secret anymore, it was a prize, and the human had unlocked it. The guardian gripped her staff, her jaw tightening. Her duty had always been to protect the gate. But now the danger was not only from within, it was from above. She looked at the human, his face pale but determined. You opened it, she said, her voice hard. But now you must protect it. Will you stand with us? The human met her eyes, his lips curling into the faintest smile. I didn't come this far to walk away, he said simply. But I'll need your strength too. Something stirred inside her chest, something she had buried beneath duty and fear. For the first time in her life, she felt not just like a guardian of stone, but a protector of something greater. She nodded firmly, gripping her staff. Then we fight together. The crowd, still shaken, turned their eyes toward the human and the guardian. For centuries they had bowed to fear, chained by the mystery of the sealed gate. But now they saw a stranger who had bled for them, a guardian who stood beside him and a light that promised hope. Slowly voices rose, not of fear, but of courage. The villagers shouted in support. Even the warriors lowered their weapons and knelt. The priests still cried of doom. But no one listened. Above, the warships descended lower, their shadows swallowing the valley. The human wiped the blood from his mouth. Standing tall despite his broken body, the guardian raised her staff high, her voice ringing across the ruins. This is our world, she declared, and we will not surrender it. The light from the core pulsed brighter, as though it answered her vow. The valley trembled, the air thick with energy. The human and the guardian stood side by side before the glowing passage. Enemies approached, war was coming, but for the first time, the people of Veora did not bow in fear. They stood ready, hearts pounding, eyes burning with the same fire they saw in the human. The sealed gate had been opened. What lay beyond was not just salvation but also conflict, and the true test had only just begun. The sky above Veora roared with engines. Dozens of dark warships hovered like predators, their shadows covering the valley. The light from the newly opened gate spilled out in defiance, painting the ruins in gold. For the first time in centuries, the sealed gate was open, and now every eye in the galaxy wanted what lay beyond. The villagers trembled, the priests screamed. The warriors gripped their weapons tighter. The guardian stood at the front with her staff raised, the human beside her, bloody and broken but still standing tall. The air was thick with fear, but in that fear lived something new, courage. The people looked at the stranger, the fragile human who had bled and endured where they had failed, and they found strength in his presence. The warships lowered, voices booming from loudspeakers. People of Veora, the invaders declared, stand aside, surrender the core, or be destroyed. The crowd stirred with panic. Some cried to give it up, others begged to fight, but the human stepped forward, his voice calm though weak. You don't surrender what was never theirs to take, he said, pointing to the light behind him. It belongs to no empire. It belongs to those who protect it. His words carried across the valley. Reaching every ear, the villagers fell silent. Even the warriors froze. The guardian's heart pounded as she looked at him. He was no priest, no king, no prophet, yet his words carried more power than any leader she had known. Her staff lowered to her chest and she whispered, He speaks like he was always meant to stand here. The warships responded with fire, Beams of energy ripped through the ruins, blasting apart towers, shaking the ground. The villagers screamed, chaos spreading. But the Guardian shouted, "Stand together!" She raised her staff, energy pulsing from its tip. Shielding part of the crowd, the human staggered forward, placing his hands on the glowing passage once more. The core responded instantly. Its light flaring, energy surged through him. Not burning this time, but flowing. It healed his wound slightly, giving him strength to stand firm. The ground trembled as the gate's light spread outward, forming a barrier across the valley. The enemy fire struck it, but instead of breaking, the barrier held strong. The villagers gasped. Hope flaring in their eyes, the invaders screamed through their speakers, demanding surrender again. But the human only raised his voice. "This light is not yours," he said. "It will not bow to conquerors. It will only answer those who protect, and I will not let it fall into your hands." The Guardian felt a surge of pride. Her chest heavy with emotions she could not name. She stepped to his side, her staff glowing, her voice fierce. "And neither will I." The warriors of Vayora, inspired by the sight, roared in unison. They raised their blades and shields, ready to fight not for tradition, not for fear, but for survival. Even the villagers picked up stones and staffs. No longer trembling, but standing tall, the priests tried to run, but no one followed them. For the first time, the people were united not by their leaders, but by the stranger who had opened the impossible. The battle began. The invaders descended with machines and soldiers, weapons blazing, but the barrier of light held, and the human guided it, channeling the core's power through sheer will. Every strike he blocked weakened him, his body shaking, but he refused to fall. The Guardian fought beside him, her staff striking down enemies, her eyes never leaving him. Together they stood, fragile human and alien Guardian holding against an army. Hours passed, and the valley became a storm of fire and light. But the people of Vayora did not break. Every time hope faltered, they looked at the human, bloodied but unyielding. Every time fear returned, they saw the Guardian beside him, fierce and unshaken, and together, they fought like a world reborn. Finally, the warships began to pull back, their engines roaring as they retreated. The invaders, shocked by resistance they had not expected, left the valley in defeat. The people erupted in cheers, their voices echoing across the ruins. Tears flowed, laughter broke through the fear, and for the first time in generations, the valley felt alive. The human collapsed, his body too weak to stand any longer. The Guardian caught him before he fell, her hands trembling as she held him close. "You did it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You saved us." He smiled faintly, his voice low but steady. "I only opened what was waiting to be free." Her eyes burned as she looked at him. In that moment, she knew his legacy would live forever, not as a conqueror, not as a prophet, but as the human who endured, the human who unlocked hope when her people had given up. The villagers gathered around, bowing their heads in respect. Even the warriors knelt, their blades lowered. The priests who had cursed him were silent now, too ashamed to speak. The Guardian held him as the light of the gate pulsed warmly behind them. "You are no longer a stranger," she said softly. "You are one of us." Above them, the sky cleared, sunlight breaking through. The sealed gate stood open, no longer a curse but a promise. And though the human was weak, his spirit burned brighter than ever. He had given his people more than survival. He had given them the courage to fight, to stand, to hope. The legacy of the human would not fade. It would be carried in every story told by firelight, in every prayer whispered beneath the stars. The gate had been waiting, and when it finally opened, it did so for him. And though the galaxy would come again with greed and war, Vayora would never bow, because one fragile man had taught them the truth, that sometimes the strongest locks open only to human hands.